Hey guys, welcome to 324 for February 15th, 2016. Sorry we're online. I know we missed our first week because of snow and we're missing this week because of snow. So I didn't want to get us too far behind. I put together a presentation that will at least get us to our next class. So here we go. Let's talk about Don Norman and our two chapters that we were supposed to read. Great. Okay, so we're talking about psychology and design, especially from Don Norman's point of view. First thing to understand is we have to know how people do things. And the reason they do things is through the gulf of execution and the gulf of evaluation. And as designers, we need to bridge those two gaps. And how are we going to do that? Well, in this drawing, we have the goal, and then we have the world. And when someone wants to do something, there becomes a gulf of execution, right? Like, how do I work this thing? What can I do? So if they come up to some type of machine or mechanism, they think these two things to themselves. What can I do to make this happen? The book uses the example of the person who can't open the filing cabinet, right? The filing cabinet was a pretty big deal in that it did not let them, it was jammed, right? And they blame themselves for that. They didn't understand how it worked. Then you find out once you do something, is this what I wanted? And what happened, right? I guess you should ask what happened first, and then is this what I wanted? So if we want to design for things like the bridge of execution, we think back to a couple weeks ago, we talked about signifiers and constraints and mappings and conceptual models, right? That's the best way that we can design for the bridge of execution. When we talk about the bridge of evaluation, that comes back to the feedback that we give. Remember we talked about in class how frustrating it is if something doesn't give you feedback? It's the same kind of thing. If something doesn't give you feedback, there's no way for you to sort of close up that bridge of evaluation. The bridge of evaluation as opposed to the gulf of evaluation. So I kind of came up with a real world example. I want you to stop and just kind of think about this. You want a Diet Coke from a soda machine, how would you do it? All right, so how would you do it? You can pause the video if you want to. Right, so what would you do? Okay, so what I would do is go through the 7 stages of action. I would come up with my goal, I'd plan, I'd specify, I'd perform, I'd perceive, I'd interpret, I'd compare. And those 7 stages of action are what we each go through when we try and do something, when we try and solve a problem, or when we try to act on a goal. So in this case, my goal is I want to get a soda, right? That's my goal. Okay. So what's next? Well, I plan, right? I formulate a plan. I think, okay, what am I going to do? I'm thinking in my head, I should probably go to the soda machine and pick the Diet Coke and get a Diet Coke out of it. And then what do I specify? Okay, in my head, I'm going to go over to the soda machine. I'm going to put my money in. I'm going to do these things, press the buttons. I'm going to get my soda out. That's how I'm going to get my Diet Coke, so I have my caffeine for the day. Then I'm going to perform them. I'm going to perform the actions. I'm going to perceive what happens. And then go from there. Okay, so I come into the machine. I've planned. I've specified. I find the Diet Coke button. I go ahead and put my money in. Press the Diet Coke button. And then I get this. I get a warning that says out of product. Well, where does that fall into our example, right? Well, in my example, I interpreted the perception, I perceived lights on the screen. I interpret that to say it's out, and I compare that was not my goal. So my goal was to buy the soda. I want a soda. My plan was to go to the soda machine and get that soda. I specified, okay, to get that soda, I'm going to put my money in, press the buttons, and do all that kind of stuff. I then perform those things I came up with in my head. I perceive what happens. The sound didn't happen. There was no like, and the soda didn't come out. Plus a little warning light came on that said that said something, but I didn't understand it. I interpreted that warning light to say, oh, look, that means that I can't get my soda. Is this what I wanted? No, I should probably go to another soda machine or go across the street to the store. Right? But in reality, did I actually want a soda? Was that my goal, or was I just thirsty? I wanted caffeine. I wanted to wake up, right? So that's, as a designer, to think about that too. Is the designer, the person might not really ever think what they're trying to do is actually for a larger goal. I was thirsty and I wanted caffeine. I didn't necessarily want a soda. Tea would have worked fine. Would have been great. Some good iced tea. And then there's a really great quote in the book from somebody from Harvard Business School. People don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill bit. They want a 1/4-inch hole. Is that true? Right, so I'll just have you talk back to the screen now. Right, it's not really true because the people want to do something with that. Just like, did I actually want the soda? No, I was thirsty and I wanted caffeine. I don't really want a drill bit. I want a hole, is what that statement said. But that's not true either. They don't really want a hole. Nobody just wants a hole, right? Unless you are building a birdhouse. That unlikely you would want a hole. Instead, in that example, you wanted a birdhouse. You want to put up bookshelves. You want to hang your TV, right? These are all real reasons why you would have a reason to have a 1/4-inch hole. So the 1/4-inch hole isn't really your goal. So here's an activity. This is about conceptual models and goals. And so let's think about this. You want to type the letter G. I want you to map out how it gets to the screen. Okay, so from in your head the letter G to a G on the screen, I want you to map it out. And the way we would do this in class is I would actually have you disassemble a keyboard and map out the process. Unfortunately, it's a snow day, and I can't have you do that. So instead, what I'm going to do is we're going to watch a video of me ripping that apart. See if it's going to let me do that. I'm bringing it up now. Let's see how this works for us. On YouTube. Bring this up. I'm going to turn off my screen share. Go back to being high. So I'm going to bring up the video now in YouTube. Please hold. Your class is very important. I had it queued up and I must have deleted it. I am sorry. I'm sure I'm going to melt the computer with all the crazy here. Okay, disassembling a USB keyboard. So here is the video. Let's go to the screen now. I'm going to switch over to screen share. Here we go. Let's see how this works.
Okay, everyone, we're going to take apart a keyboard as part of this activity. Why a keyboard? Well, I have this old keyboard. Mostly because keyboards are the thing that people most associate with interacting with computers. So if you think about how old computers worked, they almost were always just a keyboard that maybe hooked to a television or hooked to some other monitor. Time has gone on, we have keyboards, voice, all kinds of stuff we'll talk about throughout the semester, but the keyboard is a thing that we're constantly using to interact with a computer. So we're going to disassemble it. Keyboards are not complicated to disassemble, as you can tell. They're probably not really that complicated to assemble either. We're just going to go ahead and take out the screws in the back. Take out the screws first. Feel free to disassemble your own keyboard instead of watching this video. Or feel free to disassemble your own keyboard after watching this video in particular. So you can try out some of the things I'm going to show you here. Super exciting, I know.
This is my old workbench. It was very messy.
Keyboard actually looks like I broke it before. No problem, it'll still work. Make sure all the screws are out. Okay, now I'm sure we'll pull this top part off. Get all the screws. Oh, see, I missed a screw. Or 6. Alright. So take apart them all. Much smaller for this one. Every keyboard's put together a little bit different, but how they work is essentially the same, which is what we're going to take a look at. Riveting online education.
Get it, rivets.
Now, all right. Okay, so we have our base plate there. There's the rest of the screws. Now here's what is inside of the keyboard. Now the display is kind of cool, or the description there, or the plastic on top, because it kind of looks like Tron. I always think so when I look at it. Work stuff inside here. Kind of looks like Tron. What you're going to look at here now, as we disassemble the keyboard, there is this film right here, okay? And what you'll notice about this film is that it's actually 1, 2, 3 pieces of this acetate, I guess is for lack of a better word. So we've got this acetate here, piece 1. You have a clear piece that has lots of little holes in it, kind of hard to pick up on the video. And then that other piece, okay? I can remove that. And what is interesting is I have all of these little, this is the keys, right? As I press the keys, you can see there's this thing, which is like a spring, kind of like a plasticky spring. It's probably a silicone of some sort. And there's one on every button. And then up here at the top, we have all this keyboard happens to have, like volume controls and stuff, so that's up there too. So I have the acetate, I have the buttons, these things that the human actually presses. Like, see, as I press, you can see everything sort of move up and down. Or imagine this would be upside down, and as I type, what would happen? It would push down and then push back up. And then these 3 pieces of material. Okay, so we have on this particular keyboard, because we have the sound and video and audio kind of controls up here, we have more keys than a normal keyboard. A normal keyboard has about 104, give or take. So there's 104 keys here. Now we have this piece over here that I want to pull out and show you guys how this works. All right, so this is the keyboard controller, right? This is how the keyboard communicates with the computer, all right? Now, how does it communicate with the computer? Well, if we look here, this end is what? USB. You guys have all seen USB before. Awesome. Let's take a look at this. And you can see there are little bars on here on the actual keyboard controller. Now, if we have 104 keys and we have a bunch of bars, what I want you to think about is, how does this keyboard work? Right? What is it about this keyboard controller? How does it work? Even more interesting, what I want you to think about is, okay, so we have 104 keys. Look at how many wires there are that actually go, because this is the wire that goes out to the computer. How over 1, 2, 3, 4 wires does this keyboard work? If you've never used anything with electronics, that's okay. Hopefully you've had some math where you can sort of think about how this may work, and what I'm looking for is an educated guess. But how does this keyboard work is what I want you to think about. If you're working in a group, that's fantastic. You and the group, I really, like I said, highly recommend you disassembling a keyboard in person so you can take a look at how yours works. It might be completely different. It probably has, these 3 pieces of material. It might, instead of having all these individual little things, it might have one big piece of silicone. But again, how does it all work? How do you press the letter G on a keyboard, and then how does it get from the keyboard into the computer? The first step is, how do you think this works? I'll take some close-up pictures and put them in the...
Hi again. I was muted. Okay, that video, I will post a better link to it so you can watch that video directly. You don't have to watch it through this video. And again, that video should help you with the activity of how does the G key get from your brain to the screen. Okay? This is all live, so definitely not pre-recorded or scripted. I'm just going like as if we were teaching class. All right, and if we were in class, we would have actually disassembled the keyboard, which would have been a lot of fun too. Okay, so let's continue on with our presentation. Let's bring that back up. Okay. Bring this back up. Let's go to screen sharing. Share. Okay. So here we go. All right. So that's your activity. Map that out. Bring that to class next week. Okay. So what's next? Okay. So let's talk about the 3 levels at which our brain processes information, right? And processes sort of actions. And those are visceral, behavioral, and reflective. So visceral is like that gut feeling, that subconscious thing that you do. In the book, he mentions the lizard brain, right? It's like at our very basic nature, we just do stuff. We do it. Visceral. Behavioral is that the things that we do, like we've been trained to do those things. And then reflective is we think about something, right? So it's our higher level thinking. Behavioral is kind of like a if this then that, and visceral is just like subconscious gut feeling. You do it, and we do process at all 3 levels. We do think about things at all 3 levels. One way to sort of talk about that is with flow, and it's Csikszentmihalyi. He was a Russian. He's still around. Russian psychologist who studies how people work. And one of the things that he came up with was this idea of flow, right? And so flow is that concept of being in the zone. It's where things are just difficult enough for you to be challenged, but not difficult enough for you to be overwhelmed. And if you can hit that sweet spot of being just exciting enough and just challenging enough, but not too challenging, people then lose themselves in that activity, and they lose themselves in that activity. Time actually goes much slower. So, or I should say time goes really fast. Like you don't realize how fast time is going. And then boom, time flies when you're having fun, as the saying goes. Or athletes will say they're in the zone, right? That's all part of flow. And that's all part of these 3 levels of processing, right? Because at some point in time, you start shifting between the behavioral and the visceral and the reflective, and you're able to just sort of know what's going on and you feel it. And like I said, you're in the zone. If you put it all together, you'll see that our 7 stages of action, right? So we have our goal, we've planned, that's all reflective. Like we're really thinking in our head of how to do this. And then we specify, so we come up with our sets of what we're going to do, and that's our behavioral. Then we're gonna do it, right? We're gonna perform, and then the world hits us hard. And then our visceral is, we perceive it. At behavioral, we interpret it. And then in reflective, we compare it, and we see, did we hit that goal or not? There's a part of the book that talks about the 7 stages of action as design principles. I would very much like you to just completely ignore that section. I don't like this. I don't want you to do it. I'm sorry, not as design principles, but kind of like as a way to design, as a design strategy. Don't do that. I want us to really stick with the IDEO book, the Human-Centered Design book. That's much better design principles than this. And then just to recap our 7 fundamental principles, right? Discoverability, that's how fast you can figure out what to do with something. The feedback, it gives you something back after you've done something. Conceptual model, how does this thing work? And how do people process that? The affordances are that there's natural sort of feel of something, like can you turn this as a knob? Can you sit on it? Can you press it? Does it look like you should press it? Signifier gives you more discoverability, right? It's like it tells you what you can do with this thing. Mapping, does the virtual thing map back to something physical that it does? And the constraints, again, is what can we do? What's our limits? Something else that's important about sort of chapters 2 and 3 is this idea of knowledge in the head versus the world, right? So knowledge in the head is that stuff that you know, right? Things that you have already learned, things that you need to memorize. You need to know how to drive a car if you want to drive a car. The car is not going to give you feedback for every step of the way on what to do. However, knowledge in the world, there's lots of tasks that we might do that make it easier for us if we know how to do them ahead of time. So I use the timesheet or the check-in machine, a time clock, a lot in this class, So imagine if the time clock tells all users at all times what they're supposed to do next, right? That's great. That's good feedback. But at the same time, it's going to take a little bit longer to execute because the person's constantly reading and going through. Whereas if the person is quote unquote trained on how to use that thing, the knowledge then goes into their head and they can zip through that process really fast. And the time clock can be really streamlined. It doesn't have to have lots of words. It doesn't have to be busy. It doesn't have to have all this other stuff. Whereas other systems that we have, very often, especially times that we don't use things a lot, we'll have to have knowledge in the world. So when you're doing the self-checkout at the supermarket, it tells you exactly what to do because it's not something you're doing all day, every day. Whereas a time clock, you assume you would at least do it probably 4 times a work day, right? Check in, break, check out, or check back in, check out for the end of the day. So as a designer, you have to sort of blend that knowledge in the head versus knowledge in the world. What is it that you expect users to know? And then what is it you expect your designs, your things to actually give them feedback on? And just so you know, I'm not going to cover chapter 3 in this. I'm expecting you to read through it. It is a great chapter. It talks a lot about memory, knowledge, as well as there's some cultural concerns, like what we talked about in class in relation to the light switch in different countries, which I thought was a fun discussion. So that's really it for this class. As I said, it's not super long. In class, would have done a lot more with the activity of the disassembling. We would talk more about probably chapter 3, but you can read through that and get it. For next week is February 22nd. We're going to be talking about empathy and defining problems. We're going to talk about inspiration, and we're going to talk about your target audience and their problem. So here's the thing. Based off of what we did last week in class, you and your group are going to write up what your target audience is and what their problem is. You should probably put what their problem is and then what their target audience is, but whatever you want to do, right? What's the problem and who's your target audience? You don't have to come up with any solutions. I don't expect solutions. In fact, I don't even want to know about solutions yet. I don't even want to know about, oh, we're thinking of creating an app. We're thinking of doing this. We're thinking of doing that. I don't want to hear that at all. I just want you to come up with the problem and the audience for which you're going to solve, okay? I hope you guys have a great and safe snow day. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me this week, all right? I will talk to you all later, and bye-bye.